Well, hello, brother. How are you?
Hello, sister. I am on the road, but doing well.
Oh, on the road again. Nice. Well, be
On the road
careful.
again. Can't wait
Cool.
to get on that road again. Yeah, making a trip down to see a friend has a show, and I'm gonna go check it out.
Ah, that's good. Well, that's interesting and nice segue into today's episode. We're going to talk a little bit about friends, and the concept of moving from friends to romantic partners or just staying friends or not. So one of the
Yeah,
things that, yeah, so one of the things for me is in my youth and before getting married, I'd gone on dates with people just because they asked, even if I had zero romantic interest in them. And I asked myself why, and it's probably because they asked and I didn't want to hurt their feelings. And to be honest, I probably got married for the same reason. So, but as I continue on this journey of self-discovery, I find myself being really direct with myself and others, and kind of thinking like just because we're awesome people, at least in my head, doesn't
you're
mean
awesome.
that, yeah, well, thank you. Thank you for clarifying that and confirming my suspicions. Um, but just because the two people are really good people or awesome people doesn't mean that they're going to be good or awesome together. And so, it's kind of thinking about, just because I care for you as a friend doesn't mean that it should or will evolve into a romantic relationship. And so I'm trying to be very deliberate and thoughtful with that because I do find myself in engagements, relationships that aren't serving me and it's not serving the other person. So obviously it's not going to be a healthy relationship. And so I know that one of the things that you've discussed with me at least is this concept of flags. So I was wondering if you can give me and our listeners a little bit more information as it relates to what I just talked about.
Absolutely. So the concept of flags is really, whether it's a green flag, which is a go sort of thing, or a red flag, which is a no go sort of thing. Kind of your basic color driving sort of concept. But a green flag is where you have a trait or something, somebody's doing something that is positive, that is good for you, good for the relationship. They're a positive force in whatever capacity we're talking that you happen to be thinking about. And then the red flag would be the opposite, something that's unhealthy that will almost generally turn into something abusive if allowed to fester and grow long enough. So green flags are the good things, red flags are the negative, not so good, unhealthy things.
And so when
Does
you
that
think about that, would those be good from your perspective, unhealthy from your perspective, or are we talking about society's views of good and unhealthy in general?
I think that it's all of those things. Like
Mm.
it can be all of those. It can be, hey, this person likes to I don't know, likes to go hunting. I'm not a hunter. I don't appreciate people who shoot and kill defenseless animals. So that for me that would be a red flag. But there are millions of people that go hunting, and so it's
Right.
legal. It's completely fine. So societally speaking, that is completely a green flag sort of thing. But then for me specifically, in my own expectations and boundaries and values, that's not something that I would be a fan of. But then you
Mhm.
have someone who is verbally or physically or
Yeah, sure.
emotionally abusive, that is a red flag regardless.
Right.
Everyone should find that to be a red flag, and society says that that's a red flag. So it can
Exactly.
be either both or something like that. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, so I think about on the onset when I said that, I had gone on dates just because someone asked, and I didn't pay much attention to my personal flags. And so obviously those societal flags, if they're hitting or verbally or emotionally abusive, then that was a no-go. That was other than a flag, that was a stop sign, a concrete wall. But for
Right.
my own personal flags, I didn't spend a lot of time giving my personal flags a lot of power, right? So it was more of, well, I don't particularly care for this, but this person does, and I'm in a relationship with them, so let's explore it. And I do know that there's always going to be some compromise and some negotiation. But I wonder with going into a relationship and recognizing your personal flags and giving those power, just doing that and disregarding those red flags, if that can create issues in the relationship, resentment, you know, you don't do things together, just things that could eventually cause issues within that relationship.
Yeah, I think that that can absolutely be a thing for sure. If it's a real a firm value, something that you value or something that somebody values, and then that potential partner doesn't, like say take religion for example. If somebody is very religious, not just spiritual but
Right.
religious, like organized religious religion,
Hmm.
and then you have somebody that is very much not into that, whether they may be spiritual but they are against organized religion, that could potentially cause a huge divide in between those two people. Now if
Yeah.
that person is like, hey, that's not really for me, but I appreciate that you value that, and I'm going to do what I can for that for you, and
Hmm.
they're aware of it, then that can be something that can be worked around between the two partners potentially.
Right.
But if it's something where they're mocking, oh, you got to go to church, church is stupid, church, then that is
Right.
definitely not, that's not going to be a healthy relationship in no way, no how.
So
So
what
it's
I,
really,
go ahead.
I was gonna say, so it's really, it comes down to those values, because yes, it's always important that in a romantic relationship or even a friendship or whatever kind of relationship, that there are some things in common, or else what would you ever like talk about or do if you had
Mhm.
nothing in common?
Right.
But no one's going to have every single thing in common, like all the exact same things. It's just how do we communicate that, and how do we set up expectations, and to so that no one gets hurt
Yeah.
during any of that as the relationship goes on and those things come up.
Yeah. Yeah, because what I heard from you, and obviously correct me if I misheard something, but what I heard is that you can have those red flags, but if you, on the onset, like we've talked about in the past, is create those boundaries, those expectations up front, then there are ways to navigate around it, even if it is a red flag. I think for me, where it becomes a challenge, and you kind of touched on this, is when it becomes a value, when
Yeah,
it encroaches on my values. And so, for example, for me, my family's very, very important to me. And so having a partner that's like, yeah, it's just going to be the two of us and you're not going to be around your family. That I don't see negotiation around that if they're just unwilling to compromise and to understand how important family is to me.
if you have explained that to a potential partner or partner, and they go, no, then that's not, yeah, that's definitely something that is not going to work out. you know um if somebody says, hey, I love my family, and they're like, great, I appreciate that you like your family, I don't, our mine's kind of a different situation, but we get together occasionally and we talk whatever, then it's all going to come down, because just someone not wanting to be a part of their family, that's not a red flag. Societally speaking, that's not a red flag. So that person is still going to be good for somebody else, just because they don't value family like you do. But for you, that would not be such a great thing. So this person could still be
Right.
a green flag, have all the good things, but still just not be for somebody else because
Mhm.
of those values that may be different.
Right. And so it kind of goes back to what we were saying, that just because we're two good, awesome people, doesn't necessarily mean that we're good, awesome people for each other. I think
For each
sometimes
other.
that could be a challenge, right? Navigating that conversation when one partner really was like, you're green, 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 green. And for me, I'm like, you're green, red, red, green, red, red. And having that conversation, like, yeah, I think you're amazing, but you're not for me. I think that's a challenging conversation. That's something that as I continue on with this journey that I'm going to have to be very, very comfortable with and committed to whatever decision I make when it's like, yeah, these aren't going to work for me. But you can
Yeah,
say be my friend or an acquaintance. That's fine. You can have those two things. Those are available
yeah,
to you. When do you pick?
and that can be really hard for somebody, because
Yeah.
hey, there's so many things that are good about this person that you click with this person with, but then you have these pretty important things that you don't, like trying to decide. is it gonna be okay? Like, can I still be with this person even though we have these differences? Or is it somewhere where like, okay, so we have these differences, so we can't, there's no point in even trying a romantic relationship because that's going to become a problem. It's like, where do
Right.
you, at what point do you draw the line where it's like a
Hmm.
waste of time? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like, so that's
Yeah.
tough. And so people, I think a lot of people do that where they get somebody that checks off those boxes off the list. They got some green things going, but then they do have those differences, and they're like, but I like this person. They let me touch their parts and they touch mine. Like we do hang out and we can have conversations. So why would I break up with them
Mm.
when we haven't had any issues yet?
Yeah, that's interesting, especially when I mean, you can not especially, factor in external voices or external noise. You have friends, family, like, you guys look so amazing together. You're so great. Why won't you give him or her or them a chance? And I think that could also cause some confusion, having that noise interfering with what you know in your soul or whatever to be, the best path for you.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you should always listen to the people that you care and trust. Ask them for their opinions on a person because, yeah, you may be caught up in the emotion and the whirlwinds, the butterflies, and all those chemicals, those hormones are pumping through your brain, making you not see things as clearly as you might if you weren't in that, if you weren't feeling those feelings for that person. But then you have those people there in your life that you trust that may be able to give you that third perspective, that outside view of it, and say, hey, this person is good or this person is bad. And then, yes, that becomes an issue when you're thinking, yeah, this person may not be for me, but then all of those people that you trust are like, you guys are so great together. I can't wait for you to have babies, or like that sort of thing. That's going to cause some confusion for sure.
Yeah, that's a challenging conversation, and I've had slightly similar conversations, as I continue to have birthdays. Yay, that move into this space where people are like, well, you should just look for a companion. I'm like, yeah, I'm not 96 yet, so I'm not just looking for a companion, that's fine, but there are other things that are also important to
Yeah,
me this age. And so having those conversations with your support system and then having that conversation with the potential romantic interest, it's a lot. But I think that it's important though, because I'm not really fond of this phrase, but I think it's appropriate. At the end of the day, it's you that has to navigate
yeah.
and protect your happiness.
At the end of every day, it's you. That's it. Yeah, you gotta look out for yourself. You have people that are looking out for you, but they don't know all of you. You're the only one that knows all of you and
Right,
everything that's really important and really not, and to what degree those things are important or
right,
not. So, regardless of what somebody says, yeah, they can give you some great advice potentially, but it's you're the one that's going to have to make that final. You and that other person, that partner, are going to have to make that final decision on that sort of thing.
yeah, and I think that it's important to be strong, and maybe you do have one or two people that really know you, or they just don't offer up their opinion. You don't have to continually defend your position. I don't want to be with this person, even though they have, on the surface, they're amazing, but they're just not amazing for me. And I just don't want to continue defending my reasoning, my position on this. And so, making sure that you have that one person that you can bounce ideas off of, even if it's a therapist, a third party, but making
Yeah,
sure that you have that because you feel like sometimes you are in a sea of all of yeses and you're like, no, but like you said, you know yourself the best. And so when you end the day and you're with this partner that really didn't connect with you, you made that decision, right? So even if it was external voices that contributed to it, ultimately you own that decision. And
yeah,
what do you want to be happy?
yeah, you should own that decision because it's yours. But bringing out therapists, that's probably the best sort of outside voice that you would want. Someone who is impartial. They don't know all your business. They know what you tell them, but as far as your day to day, they're just there for to listen to you. So what they know is just what you tell them. So you're going to get a much less, but you're so lonely and you should just be with somebody. You need a companion, like you said. You're not going
Right.
to get that from a therapist, a counselor, where you might get that from a friend or a family member. So if somebody, I mean, we all should have therapy. I'll say that right there. But if somebody doesn't have somebody like that can be that impartial, then they need to take that into account when they're listening to that other person, that third
Right.
party. Like how much of what you're saying is just because you feel sorry for me or think that I'm lonely, and so you're just
Right.
saying yes to that just because, or do you genuinely think that this person is a good match for me? That
Yeah,
makes that really difficult.
that it's 100%. I agree with you on that. And hopefully people do have access to therapy. I think it's so important to have that unbiased person in your life. I was thinking when you were talking about, when people are like, oh, I just want you to be with somebody, especially after you just ended a relationship, all of your coupled up friends want you to be coupled up. And I think there is beauty and freedom and joy and happiness in being by yourself. And you and I look at things a little bit differently because I am naturally a loner and I'm quite okay going to the movie theater by myself, eating dinner in the middle of the restaurant by myself, going on a holiday by myself. I'm fine with this. But a lot of people aren't, and they think that when they see that on the outside, they think it's sadness, loneliness, that you're isolating yourself. And I'm like, no, I just appreciate and like myself. I'm okay. So I think that, and again, you don't want to keep defending that position because I think you just have to be okay with being okay. Like I'm me and I'm okay with that. And I don't
Yeah.
know if a lot
So
of people have that.
So you said that we were different, and yes, in the past, I definitely never wanted to be by myself. As I've said in previous podcasts, I want to be a part of a team. I like working and living and
Right.
existing with other people to get all of that bigger picture sort of thing. But I think that is a part of the reason why none of my relationships have been successful is because I got into relationships to not be by myself, not necessarily because there was somebody that was good for me.
Interesting.
So, so as we talked before, I'm sure we
Hmm.
mentioned this at some point that you need to be good with yourself. You need to be able
Right.
to be like, it's okay for me to be alone. It's okay for me to not have somebody. I can work on myself. I can figure out what's going on in my head, what kind of baggage I'm bringing in, and how can I alter that or reframe it to something more positive if it's negative, that sort of thing. You really need that, and hopefully, ideally, this is something that would happen when we were young. Like you would not just get into a relationship. I mean, there are those people that marry their high school sweethearts and then they stay together for decades, their whole rest of their lives. But that doesn't happen for the vast majority of people. So ideally, when you're young and you're experiencing the world for the first time and you're growing and learning, you're kind of doing that. I mean, you may be with friends or whatever, but you're figuring out yourself while you're doing that. It's really hard to work on yourself if you're with a partner, like with a romantic partner,
Yeah.
because you're going to want to focus a lot of your time and
Mhm.
attention on that other person and the
Yeah.
relationship. So,
Absolutely. Yeah.
so
Yeah. Go ahead.
since I've been split up and divorced, like I have learned to appreciate being by myself. I've learned to live with myself and listen and learn from the things that my brain says to me and the experiences that I've had. Um, so I'm looking at this from a completely different angle now than I had for my whole entire adult life.
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome. I love that. And we did talk about this because I said that's one of the things I try and instill with my boys is making sure that you have a sense of self so that you're not pulling from someone else's sense of self to try and define who you are. That
Yeah,
you want in a relationship being as complete as possible, knowing that we all have a growth mindset and we're going to continue to grow and learn. But that foundation needs to be there. We can't build a house on cement that's still wet because it's
right.
like to collapse. I think that's really interesting. when you were talking about that you may have you entered into relationships because you wanted to be a part of a team, I was kind of thinking about myself that I do have moments where I just want to be alone with a book. And when people look at that, it looks like detachment. And so I think an area for improvement for me would be, or to be mindful, I should say, is to make sure that I'm really explicit with a new partner or whatever, that just because I want time to myself doesn't mean that I don't want to be with you. I just need this time to, to decompress, to really center myself, because I'm not an external person. I'm more of an internal being, and it's exhausting to me mentally and emotionally to be around crowds of people, even though I can usually navigate it just fine and people don't see that. But when I leave that environment, I'm mentally exhausted because I naturally inclination is to be by myself with a book. So yeah, I think that for me, I take away, like, thanks for sharing all that. It's really to be very explicit with that, because I tend to have a Scorpio mindset that everybody should just know me and just appreciate me. Like, I don't really need to tell you, why don't you know this? But apparently they don't.
Apparently, they don't. No one, people actually can't read minds, it turns out. I mean, there might be those that can, but
No,
generally speaking, people can't read minds and know what you want, how you feel, what's good,
I
what's
would like
important
that.
to somebody. And you have to be able to communicate that.
Hmm.
So,
I would like to
um,
have that though. That would sounds fun.
yeah, it would
Kind
sound
of.
fun. Well, now we're getting into like superhero mutant powers, some of that
Hmm.
Charles Xavier, Jean
I love
Grey sort
that.
of mind reading
But
sort of
I
thing.
have to be able to have that whatever that covering, so they can't read everything. But when I'm like, oh, and they're like, here's a chocolate chip cookie. Oh my gosh, I was totally thinking about that chocolate chip cookie so much.
Yeah, that would be extremely convenient
Yes, that
for a
would be
lot of people,
wonderful.
especially the
Hmm.
introverts for sure.
Hmm.
But you can't. It doesn't happen. So we can wish and we can
Right.
hope and wish all we want, but in reality, in order for somebody to know about another person, they need to sell them, and
Hmm.
vice versa.
And I
So
think
I
that's
was
a good
talking,
test.
for instance, I was talking with a good test for what?
Oh, no, no. I'm always going to defer to you because
Oh,
guess what, audience? He's 10 years younger than me.
turns out that may be a shock to some of you if this is the first episode you've ever listened to. But yeah, so it's talking with some students this last week, and we were talking about how do you express those things, like if but in order for you to be able to tell somebody what your boundaries are, what your expectations are, what your values are, what's good, what's bad, you need to actually know that for yourself. So it seems kind of ridiculous when I'm saying it, but think about it. There are people that are in their big ages that still have never really taken the time to consider what is it that I like the most? What is it? What are those things that I appreciate or love and that I want from somebody else?
Mm.
That list that we talked about last time, like
Yeah.
they haven't done that work yet. And they've been in who knows how many relationships, and they're not healthy because they're not thinking about that stuff. So they have to know what that is and then be able to communicate those things to somebody else and get them to understand. And then that other person needs to say, okay, I hear that this X, Y, and Z is important to you, and I am okay with that. I can do
Yeah.
those things for you. I can be a part of that with you, all of that sort of stuff.
Yeah. So actually, that was part of the test that I was talking about, that I think it's a good test for introverts or people that don't really thrive in those environments where there's a lot of noise, external noise. I think it's a good test to have that conversation with a potential partner. Like, I just see my downtime, I need this, and then, measuring how receptive they are to that. If they
Exactly.
understand it, then hey, you know what? Let's move forward. One of the things that I really like, I had a friend that I was talking through with this, and in my environment, I do a lot of sales enablement training. And so we have rubrics for everything. And I know you're familiar with that because you're in education. And I was thinking, you know what, I need a relationship rubric where I list
Yeah,
out things that are very important to me. And then we collectively, maybe every quarter we'll look at it. Where are we on this rubric? Are you meeting expectations? What can we do to move you up? I mean, I'm sure that that's going to end that relationship at the analysis stage, but I think it would be fun because it's just really saying what are the things that are important to me? How do you measure success? And how do you account for any gaps in that? And so it really puts people on the same page. And I don't know if you necessarily have to have a physical rubric, but kind of that mindset of just understanding what those like 3 or 5 domains are, and then what's meeting expectation, what's exceeding expectations, what's below expectations, and then what can you do to either continue to do these things or to address any gaps.
yeah,
I
yeah.
love
I
it.
mean, that being said, there are things that are out there that are kind of designed to do that sort of thing. There are compatibility tests, and not like from Vogue or Cosmopolitan magazine, but like from actual like science based
Mm,
sort of compatibility tests that can help you figure that out. You and a potential
yeah.
partner or a partner take those tests and see how good are we in these areas? Do you agree with me on this, or is this something that you find to be unnecessary, or is this important to you? All that sort of thing. They're out there. They're out there and they are available. But then that's another good test is whether that other person will take that test. If
Well,
they're like,
sure.
we don't need that, we're good, 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 then are they really? And then that's kind of telling you they don't want to do the work or don't feel like that work is important. And if they don't feel like that work is important now, if something major does come up, are they going to feel that it's important then? So that's something to consider also.
Yeah. And so for me, I married someone that was Catholic. And so I had to go through 2 premarital tests, counseling for several weeks before we got married. And I think that there was a couple of things that we didn't account for. First, real life situations. And so when you have these contrived scenarios, anybody can say anything. And of course, you're always going to want to put your best effort forward, right? And so, but when you're faced with actual events, how do you navigate through that? And then the second is, yes, you do that on the onset, but I think it's super important to revisit that in different points and stages in the relationship because you change. Everybody changes. And like I said, we have a growth mindset. I'm going to continue to acquire information. I'm going to continue to grow in certain areas and measuring where we are individually and where we are as a partnership. And addressing any deficits or gaps or anything early on so that they don't become this huge mountain of issues where you're just like, I can't do this anymore because we either ignored it because there were other pressing things happening or we just didn't want to address it at all. But I think that it's super important to have those early conversations. Be mindful that these are contrived scenarios, and once real life happens, who knows? And then to revisit those things. And I think that's okay. I'll just one other thing. I had a team meeting last week, and one of my colleagues mentioned this concept of luck. He and his wife met when they were 17, and they're like in their 60s now, and he talks about it and he's just glowing talking about it. And so I said, wow, what are some of the things that you learned? He goes, it was luck. And I said, well, I don't know about that. I think that there's probably a little bit of communication. He said, well, some of it, a big part of it is luck because everybody changes and we are lucky that we still like each version of each other. And I said, wow, that's really interesting. So that's why I say I think it's important to understand what you want and what you don't want. So those red and green flags, to have the conversation with a potential partner and to address like, these are my values, these are my non-negotiables, whatever, and then revisit those things during certain stages in your life. Just having that cadence of revisiting it so that you don't get to the end when you're like, this is unsurmountable and I can't do this anymore. You still there?
Yeah, I mean, think about a
There's so
car.
many
Like
words.
yeah, I'm here. Yeah, there. No, think about it like a car. When you buy a new car,
Mm,
that it's brand new, so everything's new, so you don't even have to worry about much, right? But then at 30,000 miles, they say you get your oil checked
that's
regularly. It
interesting.
changed like it's
Yes.
supposed to. You get that 30,000 mile, and they're like, bring that car in and let's look at
Mhm.
everything. Let's check
Yeah.
it all out and see if everything still looks good. If there's some parts that need to be changed, something's wearing where it shouldn't. They do
Mm.
all that, and that's something that should happen in a relationship because the parts aren't new. When two people meet, generally speaking, especially at our big ages, there's then that's where, religious or not, that premarital, that
Mm.
pre-counseling. So to do that, to be
Yes.
able to have that, to figure out what that baseline is for that relationship, and that's what premarital counseling is.
Yeah.
That's what it does. It helps you do all of those things that you're just talking about. So religion will put, of course, that religious spin on it, but it's really that concept of,
Hmm.
hey, who are you?
Yeah.
Hey, who is this
That's a
other person? And
that
then
was
you
a
say,
great
okay,
analogy.
well, thank you. I have every so often, as I've said. But yeah, it's
Horrible with
that
it.
sort of thing. So then, what? Maybe it's once a year. Maybe it's once every 5 years if things are going smoothly and everyone's happy. But yeah, even happy couples should go back and dig a little deeper and just check the whole
Mhm.
relationship. Have a go to a counselor, go to a marriage counselor, and
Yeah.
say, hey, we've been married for X number of years. We are happy, but we just want to make sure that we're both still pointing in the same direction, or in a direction that's close enough that we're not going to grow apart anytime soon.
Love that. I love that. That is such, it was a great analogy, great conversation with that. That is extremely helpful. I'm going to create
Yeah,
a room. Just kidding.
create a rubric. But I'm telling you that you go online, look for compatibility tests, look for relationship, like those sorts of tests, and
Mhm.
you'll find them that they're there. Those rubrics are already there, and you just fill in your stuff, and then you have your rubric specifically for you.
Yes. I have plenty of templates for rubrics that people at work are like, oh, here she goes with her rubric.
Rubrics are fantastic.
I think that's my nickname.
The rubric.
Rubric, Ruby
That's
rubric.
fun. Ruby rubric. I love it.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's. I think that that's where a lot of marriages fail, because I really don't think. I mean, unless somebody is just blatantly a red flag and does those big societal red flag things, that I don't think that most of the time that people get divorced, it's not really because they don't necessarily like each other. They
Mm,
just grew apart,
real
or
hard.
one grew more than the other one did. Someone had
Yes,
a couple of big life experiences, and it changed their view of their perspective on things, and the other person was didn't have those so much, so they're
right.
still feeling like the relationship is 2-3 years ago, where this
Mm,
other person is like, man, I it's that seems like 1,000 years ago where we were when we started. So having
mm,
that, being able to discuss that and figure out where everyone is on a yeah, like a timed sort of every so often sort of thing. I think
mhm.
that's a part of the thing where those relationships last. Like
Yeah,
your person that you were talking about that met when they were 17 and now they're still together in their 60s. They probably do that,
yeah.
and
Mm,
that's why those marriages do last that long, because they get that enough. They may not completely understand what it is that they're doing, but
right.
they do that where they check in with each other and with the relationship as a whole, to keep themselves on a path together.
Yeah.
And I know in my marriage that did not happen one single time.
It did not happen over here either. We did that premarital counseling a couple of times, and when we did have counseling, but yeah, no rubric.
No rubric.
No rubric.
So that's sort of where we all could have much happier, healthier relationships if we realize that it takes work. Just
It does
because you
take
have
work.
these feelings for someone in the beginning, feelings aren't what keeps marriages going for 50 years. Feelings are a part of it, but it's putting in that work, checking in on each other, being there for the other person, um, making sure that everyone is good all the time. That's how marriages last for as long as they do.
And you're talking, what I'm hearing you say is that putting in the work for the marriage and for the couple, I 100% agree. But in the beginning, doing that work for yourself and continuing to check in with yourself to make sure that those green flags are still green and the red flags are still red. I think that's important
Absolutely.
too. That's a lot.
Absolutely. And that is part of what I'm talking about. Like the
Yeah.
checking in on each other, making sure each other is good, and checking in on the relationship, the two people together. Like
Yeah.
it takes all of that in order for a relationship to sustain. And that is what I bet if you talk to that person of yours that's been married for the 40 something years, they will say that they have really good communication, and they had really good communication from the very beginning, or something maybe major had happened early on and they realized, hey, we got to start talking to each other or we're not going to last. And then they did it and they continue
Hmm.
to do it. And that's why he loves his wife so much and just so beams when he talks about her, because he knows her and he
Yeah.
knows that she knows him. And they still love each other in spite of who they are, or because of who they are.
Because of who they are. Yeah, that's really it. This was really great. We are almost at time here. And I want to make sure you have an
Already.
opportunity to say, I know, right? And that you have an opportunity to say your famous words. But this was really a great conversation for me. And it gives me a lot of joy and hope as I continue, like I said, navigating this new world and this new existence for myself. And so I appreciate
Yeah.
that. Thank you for always thank you for your insight and for your conversation. So we will pick back up in a week. And for our audience, we're super excited that we may have a guest come and join us. So we're trying to get her to say yes to the dress. So I will turn
Say
it,
yes.
yes, say yes. I'll turn it over to you, brother.
All right, so viewers, if you, I mean, listeners, whoever you are, all the people that are listening to my voice right now, do you hear the words that are coming out of my mouth? Remember, if you like what you hear, subscribe to us, follow us, like it, give us comments.
Yeah.
Eventually we're going to run out of stuff to say. So if you have any ideas of things that you want to hear us talk about, hear us discuss, let us have it. The comment sections are open. So have at
Yes.
it. We can't wait to hear from you.
All right. I love you, brother. Be safe on the road.
Love you, sister. Indeed. I will talk to you soon.
All right.
All right.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Bye.